for some reason our meters are crossed or something's going on, and the next door neighbors apparently are having theirs shut off, but it shut ours off, which means we're probably been paying their bill for like 3 or 4 or 5 months, which explains why we're paying $200 to $250 a month in the summer.
So a little over a week ago, Julie was on her daily conference call around 9:30 when the power went out. This is not abnormal in this neighborhood. The power goes out quite frequently. She plugged in our landline, the analog line, and she finished out her meeting, and then she called the CU, City Utilities. The power company said that there had been no power outage reported in the area. And I went next door to the neighbor's house, the one that's attached directly to the duplex. We actually share the meter and the breaker box outside of our house here. 2 individual meters, but 1 breaker box. Knocked on their door, there was no answer, so I assumed they weren't home. While Julie and I were sitting and playing cards, killing time, waiting on the CU, we started hearing what sounded like a condenser on a refrigerator, and I thought our power had come back on. Then we realized the sound was coming from the neighbors next door. And that was very strange because how do we not have power and they had power? So as I was talking to Julie about how odd that was, then we heard the noises next door. The neighbors were home, but for some reason they weren't answering their door. Well, eventually CU showed up and explained to us that of course our power was out because they had put a lock on our utility box for not paying our bill. Because we literally had just paid the utilities the week before, we had gone out there to investigate what he's talking about. Now, we share a breaker box between the house with 2 individual meters on it. Ours has always been the bottom. When going outside, indeed, our part of the breaker box had been padlocked up for not paying a bill. The problem is, the bottom label had the neighbor's address put on it. This is what we're dealing with today. These 2 plaques have been unscrewed and reversed. We lost power for about 2 hours today because somebody decided to swap these out so they wouldn't lose power for not paying their bill for 3 months. We've also verified with the utility company that we have been paying an outrageous electric bill for 3 months. A duplex of this size should not be running $250 a month. That's ours. That's not our house number. Yeah. I'm pissed. So, when the power initially went out, I was trying to find out if it was the neighbors across the street's problem, because of the diesels, to see if this entire block was out. So I actually walked next door. You know, the same place that has garbage piled up on the porch, that has 2-week-old hot dogs next to a grill and some barbecue sauce. I walked next door to see if their power was out or not. Their car was home. Nobody answered the door. I assumed they were gone for the day. Around the time the electric company finally showed up, we could hear them in there talking. Couldn't make out what they were saying. We heard them bouncing around in there. Had gone over there where the utility guy was here. Still not answering their door. I know it's innocent until proven guilty, but this shit is infuriating. So I decided with the utility guy to go ahead and trek over to the neighbor's house again to question them about the breaker box outside. Once again, we went over next door to verify if they were there. There was no answer, even though we could clearly hear them inside the house and the vehicle was home. So we discussed what was going on with the city utilities gentleman. He explained to us to contact the landlord to get the plaques changed back, as well as contacting city utilities and have them open an investigation to make sure we haven't been paying the neighbor's bill for 3 months. So when the gentleman from City Utilities was still here, he had contacted utilities, via walkie-talkie, and after utilities verified the information, instead of putting just a padlock on the breaker box itself, they said, quote, boot it, which means basically they removed the faceplate off the meter itself, and they place a little device that locks up the meter, which means that the neighbors cannot utilize it at all until things are figured out and put it back together. We were then informed, after contacting city utilities, that somebody would be coming out to open an investigation to see what was going on with the meters. So later that day, the second gentleman from city utilities had showed up and verified it did indeed look as though the plaques had been swapped around. He also began to question me if I happened to notice the power usage from the unit on top, because I had stated before that we knew ours was the lower half of the unit because I had actually spoke with Cassie about it a few months before. And when Cassie and I had been discussing, it was about 4 in the morning, it was still during the summer, and Cassie and I were out there playing around, And we noticed that the top house, the address being the top house, so we could verify it was theirs, spun about 3 times as fast as ours was spinning at 4 in the morning. And I explained to Cassie, this is why we're so adamant about her and Kaylee turning off the electricity when they leave the house, turning it off when they're not in the rooms, to avoid a high power bill. Once I explained this to the city utilities gentleman, he said to me, quote, "Do you think they're growing pot?" I really don't know what they're up to next door. I can't speak on their behalf. Only thing I can say is it's not out of the realm of possibilities. So later that day, the third gentleman from CU showed up to verify the same information. However, when he knocked on our door, he asked us what issues we'd been having and asked about the plates being swapped around because that's what all the paperwork had stated. I said, that's the case. He's like, well, no, these are right outside. And sure enough, you go outside at this point of the day and the 2 plaques had been swapped back. Luckily, we'd been videotaping the whole experience, so we had evidence that the plates were incorrect early in the morning and had been swapped out. The continuing saga of the city utilities breaker box. We had yet another investigator come out and verify the breaker box and the numbers being swapped around, and magically the 2 numbers have now corrected themselves. The person from investigations told me that they haven't anybody out to actually move these or correct them yet, that they said they can't do that without the landlord's permission. We're going to contact our landlord to make sure that magically the utility or that the repair guy hasn't come out and swapped the placards on here. However, the plaques have been moved yet again. Then the maintenance man shows up and he knocks on our door and he's like, "Do you guys have power?" And we're like, "Yeah, they turned it on earlier in the day." And he's looking at her and he's like, "There's nothing wrong with these plaques. They're in the right area." And I'm like, I know, the third utility guys already showed up and verified that somebody had swapped them back. But luckily we have video of everything going wrong earlier in the day. And then he's like, well, I thought you said over the phone that they had booted up the meter. And I'm like, well, they did boot up the meter until they get this all figured out. And they had put a notice on their door stating the power had been shut off, a little manila envelope on their door stating what had happened and that they need to contact these city utilities. He's like, well, the meters were on and running fine. And sure enough, we went outside, the top meter was running again about 3 times as fast as ours, and everything had been fine and dandy. And at this point, the maintenance man seemed very distrusting that we were telling the truth about everything that had happened. So this is kind of where we're stuck. It seems as though the maintenance man who works for the landlord seems very distrusting of the things we told him. We have a city utility company that doesn't want us to really mess with anything until we have an investigation, but they made it seem as though maybe law enforcement or they wouldn't get involved for the fact the neighbors were, at least swapping plates, allegedly, or doing some other illegal activity. And we're dealing with the fact that there's hot dogs out there from the Jurassic era. At this point, we feel like we've been bent over the proverbial table and taken one for the team, because nothing's happened. Heard nothing from CU, nothing from the landlord, and they're still living next door as happy as ever, which is fine. I'm assuming something has gone on behind the curtain. The great Oz brought down his wrath, and things are changing a little bit. We've noticed that there's been a flatbed pickup out there. We've noticed that we've heard dragging, it sounds like furniture, through the house. The hot dogs have mysteriously disappeared, probably eaten by the family. The trash has been picked up. And even though the power has been turned back on, I'm assuming that there's a great reason to all of this. So, yeah. What happens from here? We don't know. Stay tuned. We're as clueless as you are.